I have to say, personally, I feel extremely proud that we have such outstanding role models in Barbados. And even as someone my age, which is kind of getting on now, I really see outstanding exemplary role models in the three gentlemen that we've elevated here this evening. Okay, so we're moving on to our feature address. The Right Honorable Owen Arthur is Barbados's fifth, or was Barbados's fifth, and longest serving Prime Minister, holding the office from September 1994 to January 2008. The notable economist is an alumnus of both the University of the West Indies Cave Hill and the Mona campuses. He earned a bachelor's degree in 1971 in economics and history at Cave Hill, and his master's degree in economics in 1974 at Mona. He began working in Jamaica in 1973, first as a research assistant at the university, and later as an assistant economic planner with the government of Jamaica's National Planning Agency. The former Prime Minister was also telling us about his work in the bauxite industry in Jamaica earlier this evening. In 1981, he returned to Barbados and served as Chief Project Analyst in the Ministry of Finance and Planning from 1981 to 1983, and then 1985 to 1986, and also served as a research fellow at the UWI's Institute of Social and Economic Research, now the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies, from 1983 to 1985. His political career began with his appointment to the Senate in 1983. In 1993, he was appointed as the parliamentary opposition leader as head of the Barbados Labour Party. And in the September 1994 election, he became Prime Minister. While Prime Minister of Barbados, Mr. Arthur had lead responsibility within CARICOM for the Caribbean single market and economy. Mr. Arthur has also had experience as a consultant to various local, regional, and international organizations. And in November 2018, he was appointed as Professor of Practice at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, where he oversees economics of development. Mr. Arthur is the holder of the Order of Jose Marti of Cuba. We invite the Right Honorable Owen Arthur to deliver his feature address, the subject, Visioning a Successful Economic Future for Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Minister Sutherland, distinguished honorees, members of this association, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I trust that the organizers of this event would have informed you of the quite considerable difficulty they experienced in getting me to consent to address you. For I strongly believe that the only appropriate role for a former leader of our nation is to be seldom seen and seldom heard. This very useful principle, which I believe in, was expressed with great eloquence thousands of years ago by, I believe, Cicero, when he said that many a man has lived too long. He was not advocating for capital punishment. He was in fact reflecting on a sad but common phenomenon whereby some men have sought to stay on center stage long after any justification could be advanced for their continued presence there. I believe that the Argument which I attribute to men can be in this gender-neutral age be also applied with equal force to women if the painful, sad experience of Hillary Clinton is anything to judge by. So for those of you who like to read into things and to derive meaning that was not intended, please let me begin by establishing that my presence here is not any evidence of any desire on my part to resume a career in public life. In fact, I may also say, without being vulgar, that this is the second major activity I've undertaken in a week. And some people may find it strange that someone at my age can do certain thing twice in a week. I am here because engineers know how to bend steel, and they have, in this instance, chosen to apply those skills to your unwilling servant. I have chosen to address you tonight within the theme, Imagining Barbados' Future Economy. I have chosen imagining rather than planning, because if ever there was a time when there was a need for imagination and creative thinking to be brought to bear on our nation's circumstances and its future direction, that time is surely now. I can think of immediately of two very powerful reasons why this need for a new imagination should be the case. The first, and you must know it will be a little bit controversial. The first is that the public's discourse on our economic affairs is coming to be dominated too much, in my judgment, by how we are doing in meeting IMF tests and carrying out austerity and fiscal consolidation programs. These concerns would be too narrow for Barbados at any time, but they are too narrow now. Our national focus at this early period in our national development and our independence must always be directed towards nation building. And this is not to deny that the IMF program can help to restore stability to the public finances and to the reserves at a time when the restoration of such elements of stability are necessary to create the foundations for future development. But it is important that we understand that all the IMF program is intended to do is to achieve stability rather than to grow, develop, and transform Barbados. And we must be careful of falling in love with such narrow objectives, because it has been very well observed that some men grow to love their chains and with time come to regard them as wings. I fear that I have to confess that I experience this sensation whenever I hear Mr. Passad speak about our circumstances. My second reason for speaking about imagining Barbados' successful future is that the discourse on that future has to be engaged in on more than a discussion on fiscal and balance of payments issues. It has especially to be rooted in an evaluation of the workings of the forces which have brought us to our present state, and also the nature and the possible impacts of the forces which must come to exert themselves as influences on the dynamics and the trajectory of Barbados' development over the foreseeable future. And this brief exposition is to address these broader issues. We can look at the sciences for a broad explanation of the workings of the forces which I am attempting to discuss with you. For from the study of the science, we know that when the environment within which a species operates changes radically, and that species is slow or unwilling to adapt, it can commit itself to the specter of sustained decline and even extinction. We also know that all physical systems left to themselves will tend towards a state of entropy. The message here is that the environment within which Barbados' development has taken place and in which the nation has prospered over the past half century has changed dramatically. There has been something of a national response, but that response has not been broad enough, nor deep enough, nor imaginative enough to allow the nation to prosper given the forces with which it has had so to contain. So new forces have now to be brought to bear for us to envision a productive and a successful future for our society. In a word, Barbados finds itself operating on a fault line which divides two worlds where we are concerned as a people. One world that is virtually dead, the other that is struggling to be born. And let me quickly review some of the challenges that have to be confronted as the country makes the transition from one socio-economic world to another. First, for most of its modern history, Barbados has followed, in large measure, the Nordic model of development, featuring the provision of a wide range of social benefits and services paid for by the state to our citizens at large. The pursuit of that model, however, just checking. No, my luck. It white. I wish you had brought a pineapple juice or something like that, because my luck. It white. The pursuit of the Nordic model, involving the provision of a wide range of services to the citizens by the state, requires a strong and growing economy. But that no longer exists in Barbados. As such, we now live in a nation where the social sector and the range of social benefits we extend to our society have become too large for the economy, which is in itself undergoing transition, to carry. And there is now a fundamental disharmony between our social development and our economic development. More to the point, we do not have, but we need a national consensus as to how a new harmony can be brought to bear and be restored at the center of our society between social development and economic development. Secondly, some of the critical forces which drove development in post-independence Barbados are no longer and can no longer be put to work. Before 1994, Barbados was in a position to offer protection under international trade law, the Tokyo Round, the enabling clause. We were in a position to offer tariff and non-tariff protection to our traditional enterprises in agriculture and manufacturing. With the coming into existence of the WTO, countries are no longer in a position to offer such protectionism, but has to admit international competition to our domestic enterprises at home. The radical and rampant decline of agriculture and manufacturing, post-1994 especially, is because they have been stripped of their historic protectionism. Secondly, the replacement of the provisions for special and differential treatment by the application of rules requiring reciprocal trade have further weakened the ability of our traditional sectors to contribute to national development. Third, a lot of the economic development of Barbados since independence, and especially the building of a professional middle class, was due to the vibrancy of the offshore business sector. And in that regard, to the extent to which it depended for its existence and for its vibrancy on a unique tax benefit given to Barbados by Canada. And I believe that Errol Barrow was very instrumental in getting Trudeau to do this. And what was this? That Barbados was the location where Canada allowed, because we had a tax information exchange agreement, a company based in Barbados paid taxes in Barbados at 1% and was allowed to remit its dividends to Canada without paying taxes in Canada. That is what grew, in large measure, our offshore sector. That revenue, more than the revenue from any other tax or any other sector, was a great addition to Barbadian prosperity and was what allowed us to build a modern economy, but also a social sector of the kind that we have. In 2008, Canada, it was called the exempt surplus provision. Canada agreed to give a similar concession to all other countries, including those in the Caribbean, that were prepared to enter tax information exchange agreements with them. And the revenue from the offshore sector plunged from $350 million to $96 million. Mr. Chris Sinclair sought to address it by replacing the revenue from the offshore sector with the National Responsibility Levy. Barbados lost $250 million from a sector that was getting, it was a tax on realized profits, and it was money coming in from outside Barbados, so the tax was not affecting any business in Barbados. To try to replace $250 million in taxes received from an export sector that has no revenue generation in Barbados with a 10% social responsibility levy, means that you had to try to bring in a 10% social responsibility levy to raise $250 million would have to fall on $2.5 billion of economic activity. So to try to replace the loss in revenue from this sector with the national social responsibility levy, Mrs. Sinclair had to bring $2.5 billion of domestic activity into the tax net, which might explain why, in an economy that is a $9 billion economy, but so drastic, that might explain why the Democratic Labour Party lost every seat in the last election. So as they say, our circumstances has changed. That tax benefit that used to be offered only to Barbados, and which caused Barbados to be the place, and sometimes we don't know what is happening. Barbados became the place with the third highest concentration of Canadian capital in the world. By that measure alone, $60 billion of Canadian investment came to be located in Barbados. It's lost. And it lost by as much as $250 million in revenue from one sector alone, explains in large part why we are struggling. It explains as well why sometimes desperate measures have been resorted to try to replace it. Because as you know, this administration, and I'm going to be accused of being anti-mayor, but our administration has sought to deal with it by having three different corporation tax rates in 1 year. In 1 year, we started with a 25% corporation tax, then it was increased to 30%, and then it was dropped to 1%. You simply cannot create an environment of certainty if people have to face three different corporation tax rates in 1 year. We need, however, now, because of this, to create a new class of international business which does not depend on discretionary tax benefits, but can use modern tools of communication and the provisions in international tax law to build a new international business sector. Fourth, there are new challenges, such as the de-risking initiative being carried out by the advanced countries, and changes in the regulatory regimes of the major economic partners that have further reduced vibrancy in our international business sector. It may not be aware that the de-risking problem, the inability of some Barbadian companies not to be able to get corresponding banking relationships, does not affect our domestic banking sector. It has affected our international offshore banks and has caused many of them to leave Barbados. 6, and this is especially intended for the engineers to hear, Barbados has inflicted on itself the punishment of having large fiscal deficits, but little or no public sector capital investment. In the early stages of a country's development, there must be the commitment to build for the future. And governments do this by having robust capital development programs. The state contributes to this by a strong capital development program and borrowing for such a purpose. In Barbados' case, the recent experience has been that we have been borrowing heavily, not to support capital development, but for current expenses including borrowing to have people debushing along the roads. And this has helped to bring the country to its current crisis. This evening, I say to you that there are a number of projects, like the Scotland Rehabilitation Project, the Pearhead Development Project, for which enabling legislation was put in place before I left government as the leader of the country, but which have been left to languish. And can you imagine if we had a capital development program to take the Scotland district, which is 1/7 of our land area? We did a geotechnical survey of it, and we also got the FAO to do a study of every plot of land and what we should do with it. Can you imagine if we were to tap funds that are now available globally for global mitigation and adaptation in the fight against global warming to rehabilitate our Scotland district, freeing up our rest of our lands for commercial development, but making that land what it should be in our national development. The Scotland District redevelopment cries out for a substantial capital injection, and there's no good reason why the Scotland District Authority, that was the last act that I presided over, to bring all of government's agencies in the Scotland District together and to put new resources to bring about sustainable development. There's no good reason why the authority should not be brought into existence. Equally, there's legislation in the books for the Pearhead development and to enable Barbados to be able to attract not just yachts coming for residential marinas, but crossing the Atlantic, and rather than having to go to St. Lucia, to have a place in Barbados. I may tell you that the Pearhead, the Coast Guard was moved from the Pearhead to its present location in the belief that all of that land would become available for the Pearhead Development Project. And that was done in 2007. And there's an act of Parliament called the Pearhead Development Act. And how you would know how we felt about those things. When I asked you all to invest in Port St. Charles, I tell you I have to do it under an act of Parliament so that the people of the country would know what you are getting tax concessions for. There is a similar piece of legislation called the Pearhead Development Act that envisages the transformation of that area of Barbados where our best beach is located, where you have a multiplicity of abandoned government properties going back to the old General Hospital, sitting on the best beach in perhaps the Caribbean and waiting to be implemented. Barbados needs, as it has always done, a strong public sector capital development program carried out by new public-private sector partnerships and arrangements to spur the growth and development of the society at large. No robust capital development, no significant growth nor transformation in this country. And I would expect that the engineers who would be the principal beneficiaries of a robust capital development program should be the persons in the vanguard of the struggle to restore these kinds of economic dimensions to our country. And what about the future? To create a brighter future, Barbados has to be transformed from one that depended upon unique but unsustainable tax benefits such as you had for the offshore sector, unique trade preferences, one driven only by land and labor, to one that is now driven by technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And this will especially be true if the potential to make industrialization and our financial services continue major contributors to our growth and development. And why do I say this? That Barbados' future development will take place at a time when the world is experiencing a fourth industrial revolution. And that revolution is taking place globally. We laid a foundation to participate in that world by our efforts to make digital technologies available and a factor in our development through the EduTech program and the reform of the telecommunications sector. But those were the foundations for participating in a world undergoing industrial revolution. There's every indication also that there's every indication now that a fourth industrial revolution is taking place globally and will be accelerated by a convergence of digital, biological, and physical innovations. That is what the revolution entails. There is therefore a need for Barbados to go beyond EduTech, beyond the reform of the telecommunications sector, and to undertake a second generation of reforms to enable the country to participate in this fourth industrial revolution and to build on the foundations that were established by EduTech and the reform of the telecommunications sector. Such a development is not beyond us. Our capacity to operate in such a knowledge-based process of development is not constrained by our small size. It will depend on the quality of our human capital and our country's capacity to hold it and to build upon it as the basis for our new development. And in that capacity, we have a problem that needs to be fixed. Barbados has invested large sums in the development of its human resources at the tertiary level to drive our development. But studies have shown that fully 80% of the output of our tertiary institutions have to find employment abroad. They go elsewhere to transform other societies. Initiatives, not just like regathering, have to be devised to allow us to build industries for the future in a global society which is undergoing that industrial revolution, by enabling more of our tertiary graduates to be able to want to work and to be able to work in the transformation of the Barbados society rather than being an export by Barbados to help the development of the world. As I said, there's also a fintech revolution taking place, which is dramatically transforming the financial sector using new technology as the platforms. we have, too, an interest in this sector as a pole of growth, and Barbados has to prepare itself to become involved in the financial revolution technology that is taking place. Surely, if we are to move in these directions, the time is upon us when we too have to start building smart cities and smart communities like Mauritius, Singapore. Jamaica has just recently declared New Kingston as a smart city, and Singapore has designated Singapore as a smart society. I have in recent times been calling upon the country to declare the area running from Warrens to the University of the West Indies as our first smart city, to be able to give our tertiary trained graduates a physical environment within which they can come back to work that is similar to that which they need to work in to make a living abroad. So, to support our national efforts to fit our development of the society into the fourth industrial revolution and the fintech revolution, two other major transformations are required of us. First, every major international publication about Barbados illustrates that one of the most fundamental difficulties is getting access to credit. We have a financial system that is risk averse and is more willing to finance consumption rather than finance new entrepreneurship. Our financial sector, however, is awash with liquidity. Our society has an abundance of young people and potential entrepreneurs with ideas. But our financial sector is not designed nor willing to cater to them because it is too risk averse. I would rather collect its returns from excessive charges and fees rather than making productive loans to people who want to transform their circumstances and also to build the country. This backwardness and anti-developmental tendency in our financial system has to be addressed if we can build a society that can fit into the fourth industrial revolution and the fintech revolution by people being willing to take risk. And secondly, Barbados has gone far backwards in relation to the ease of doing business in this country. Growth, poverty eradication, development comes from two sources: the expansion of existing enterprises and the creation of new ones. And these things will not happen if a business culture conducive to enabling enterprises to reduce costs and make returns, good returns, do not exist. Our existing reports indicate that the things are stacked against the expansion of enterprises and the creation of new ones. And in order, we will do well to remember then that we have, if we are going to transform the society, we have to build a new business culture in which public sector ordinances and regulations are modernized, and the things that stymie the creation of enterprises and the expansion of enterprises are removed, since these might very well be the biggest constraints to the successful development of Barbados. I'm at present writing my memoirs, and part of it is called My Jamaican Days. And I have had the need to go back to Jamaica to see what is happening in Jamaica. And Jamaica is showing that with the correct outlook, what we now regard as our biggest constraint can be removed. Jamaica is now the fastest developing economy in the Caribbean. And why? Because the government has stimulated and is facilitating a massive capital development program using new modalities by which to bring about capital development. If Jamaica can do it, why not we? It has now the most innovative and the most far-reaching ease of doing business regimes in the region, all designed to reduce costs, to enable enterprises to make high rates of returns, and in so doing, to create an environment conducive to the expansion of existing enterprises and the creation of new ones. It has a policy, an incomes policy, that has been designed to link changes in incomes to changes in productivity. And if I had truly wanted to be controversial this evening, and you know I'm on my best behavior, I would have to say that Barbados needs now to have a new mindset where it begins to discuss national policy by integrating our approaches to the generation of income, productivity, and the exchange rate. Let me put it very briefly, since I don't want to be misunderstood. A person working in a Barbados hotel is paid much more than a Jamaican doing the same job, but there's no evidence that a Barbadian doing that job is more productive than a Jamaican. So if you had to make an investment, where will you go? They're going to Jamaica. A Barbadian or enterprises have, most of them now are in a position where their wages are lower than productivity. They're higher than productivity. So you cannot make good rates of returns in Barbados. But Jamaica, the opposite is true. But we pass on our wage costs at a fixed exchange rate, whereas Jamaica gives itself the virtue of using a variation in its exchange rate to make itself more and more competitive. And when you put income generation, productivity, and exchange rates together and begin to discuss them in the context of what is necessary for development, I believe that you will understand why we may need to begin to change our perspective on certain things. So, if others can do this, why not us? And I'm therefore this evening here to say that what is necessary to get us to move to a more successful levels of transformation requires of us to recognizing that it's not just a fiscal issue. It is not just a balance of payments issue.
that the environment within which our development used to take place has changed. And we need not just to change the tax rate, but to change the environment for our development. And I remain optimistic about our future because I believe that there is a yearning in our society for the country to adopt not just a new fiscal set of measures, but a new approach to its transformation. For I close by this quotation, it is still true in Barbados, and I quote, that everyone expects to go further than his father went. Everyone expects to be better than how he was born. And every generation has but one big impulse in its heart: to exceed all other generations of the past in all of the things that make life worth living. I'm obliged to you.
Now, that is a speech that's obviously very hard to follow up on, so that was outstanding. Thank you, former Prime Minister. I can see, yeah. BAP is, the committee is always looking for things to discuss in public fora and to use in our CPD activities to promote membership interest and so on. And there's a lot there that the former Prime Minister talked about that we can perhaps delve into a lot more deeply. He talked about a robust capital development program, including using public-private partnerships as a modality. The fourth industrial revolution, which is technology-driven, which is squarely in the wheelhouse of professional engineers, and certainly work in transforming the ease of doing business in Barbados. Just last week, there was a session held on the new planning and development framework for Barbados. So there really is a big role for engineers in helping to transform the economy which the former Prime Minister has imagined for us. So my time for the evening is almost at an end. Earlier at our table, there was a conversation about how getting enough sleep helps you to live a longer life, or in fact, how not getting enough shortens your life. So I'm going to help you guys to live a little bit longer by wrapping up here quickly now. So I'm going to invite to the podium to deliver the vote of thanks the treasurer of the BAP, Engineer Andrea Palmer.
Former Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Owen Arthur, Minister Dwight Sutherland, Minister of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce, President of BAP, Lieutenant Colonel Brown, fellows, honorary members, fellow Bape members, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks this evening. I, on behalf of Bape's Executive Committee, wish to thank everyone involved in making this evening a success. We would like to express our sincerest appreciation to our guest speaker, former Prime Minister Owen, for taking time out of his busy schedule to address us this evening. The role of engineering in establishing a sustainable Barbados, his knowledge and expertise in economics was expertly expressed in his presentation. Thank you, sir. Thanks to Savannah Hotel for providing this lovely venue and delicious meal. Special thanks to our main sponsor, TMR, other sponsors, Adams Consulting Inc., Alan Armstrong Associates, the Barbados Light and Power, Caribbean Consulting Inc., C.O. Williams Construction Limited, the ERB, Godson Builders, Stantec Consulting Caribbean Limited, Steve Building Works, and Steinbach Management Services for making this evening possible. Thanks to the DJ for keeping us entertained throughout the evening, and the photographer and videographer for capturing these special moments throughout the night. We would like to thank you, the patrons, for gracing us with your presence. Your support is well appreciated. Lastly, special thanks to our administrative assistant, Ms. Stacy Burgess, for bringing everything together and making tonight a success. Thank you, and do enjoy the rest of your evening.